For over a century, a single name has haunted us. A name that's become synonymous with terror, with mystery, and with the fog-drenched streets of Victorian London: Jack the Ripper. But what if, after all this time, a ghost from that very fog was suddenly caught in the glare of 21st century science? A new claim is trying to do just that. And believe me, it could change everything we think we know about the world's most infamous cold case.
That's right, in a case that's been built entirely on speculation, on shadows, and on dead ends. A bombshell claim has absolutely rocked the world of true crime. The idea that modern science has finally done what Victorian police never could: unmask the killer.
And this is the man right at the center of it all, Aaron Kuzminski. He was a Polish barber, and maybe the most incredible part, one of the original police suspects way back in 1888. So is this really the end of the story? Or is it just the beginning of a whole new controversy?
Okay, so you're probably wondering, how on earth could a case this old possibly turn up new evidence? Well, the answer hinges on a single, pretty extraordinary artifact: a silk and wool shawl, which was said to have been recovered from a crime scene and then passed down through generations, like some kind of grim family heirloom.
Now this is where it gets really interesting. Scientists said they extracted something called mitochondrial DNA, or mDNA, from what they identified as semen stains on the fabric. They then took that genetic material, compared it to a living descendant of Kuzminski's sister, and declared it was a match. And on top of that, they also found DNA they said was consistent with the fourth victim, Catherine Eddowes.
The impact was just immediate and massive. Headlines everywhere screamed that the mystery was finally solved. The author who actually commissioned the testing, a man named Russell Edwards, published a book and basically proclaimed the case was closed. It was a pretty stunning moment. Even the descendants of Catherine Eddowes started calling for a formal inquest to finally put a name to their ancestors' killer.
But, just as quickly as that celebration began, the scientific community fired back. That bombshell piece of evidence was immediately put on trial, and the case that seemed totally closed was suddenly blown wide open, all over again. So it really comes down to this massive divide. On one side, you've got what looks like a perfect forensic link, a chain connecting the victim, the killer, and the crime scene. But on the other side, you have a whole chorus of geneticists and historians raising some really serious red flags about the evidence itself. And this slide just perfectly illustrates the core problems. First off, there's absolutely no official proof the shawl was ever even at the crime scene. Its whole story is based on family lore. Second, it was handled for 130 years. That's a complete contamination nightmare. Third, and this is a big one, mitochondrial DNA isn't like a fingerprint. It only traces a maternal line, which means thousands of people in 1880s London could have shared it. And finally, the study's raw data was never released, making it impossible for other scientists to even try to verify the findings. So yeah, the backlash was severe. That quote from Walter Parson pretty much sums up what the experts thought. It actually got so bad that in 2024, the very journal that published the findings issued an official expression of concern, citing missing data and major trust issues. The solution to the mystery had now become a mystery itself. To really understand why this case is so impossible to solve, we have to go back to where it all began. So let's rewind the clock to 1888 and see how the chaos of the time created the perfect storm for a killer to thrive, and then to just vanish. This was Whitechapel, a densely packed, impoverished district in London's East End. I mean, just try to picture it. Overcrowded slums, terrible sanitation, and a constant thick fog mixed with coal smoke that made it almost impossible to see your own hand in front of your face. It was the kind of place where criminals could easily melt into the maze-like streets and alleys. In just 10 short weeks, during the autumn of 1888, 5 women were murdered with this brutal, escalating violence. Their throats were cut and then followed by these gruesome mutilations. This timeline of the canonical 5 really shows the killer perfecting a terrifying routine, striking in the dead of night and then just disappearing without a trace.
And the police? They were completely and utterly overwhelmed. Forget DNA. They didn't have fingerprinting, they didn't have blood analysis, they didn't even have crime scene photography. Their entire investigation basically consisted of interviewing thousands of people and relying on sketches. Newspapers at the time called the police utterly useless, as public panic just boiled over into fury.
But there's another incredible layer to this whole story. What if the very persona we all know, the taunting, top-hatted villain, wasn't even real? What if Jack the Ripper was actually an invention?
So have you ever really stopped to wonder about that? I mean, the name is so iconic, it feels like it's just always existed. But it had a very specific and, it turns out, a very controversial origin.
It all started right here. A letter sent to the Central News Agency, taunting the police and claiming responsibility for the murders. And for the very first time, it was signed with a new, chilling pseudonym, Jack the Ripper. And just like that, the press had their villain, and a name to splash across every single front page.
And here's the twist. The most widely accepted theory today is that the Dear Boss letter was a complete fabrication, that it was actually created by a journalist at the news agency just to generate shock and, keep the business alive. A police detective at the time even wrote that pretty much everyone at Scotland Yard knew it was a hoax.
So once that name was out in public, the floodgates just opened. Hundreds of copycat letters poured in, creating this absolute storm of media hysteria and public fascination. The legend of Jack the Ripper wasn't just born from the murders themselves, but from a media frenzy that gave a faceless killer a terrifying personality.
Which brings us to the final and maybe the biggest question. After more than a century of hoaxes, of false leads, of scientific debate, why are we still so completely obsessed with this case?
Psychologically, the Ripper case just hits every single button. It gives us that thrill of fear, but from the safety of our couch. It fuels our deep-seated desire to understand the darkest parts of human nature and our need to see justice served. It's like a real-life morality play where we all get to be the detectives.
And you can see that obsession reflected absolutely everywhere in our culture. The Ripper has been endlessly reinvented for new generations, from major Hollywood films like From Hell to blockbuster video games like Assassin's Creed.
I mean, the list is just incredible. In Star Trek, he was an alien entity that literally feeds on fear. In Doctor Who, his story gets all tangled up in time travel. He's even faced off against Batman. The fact that the case is unsolved means that storytellers can do anything with him. He can be a man, a monster, or a complete myth.
And that really leads us to our final thought. Maybe we don't actually want an answer. Maybe the real reason Jack the Ripper has haunted us for so long isn't because we don't know who he was, but because he could have been anyone. His anonymity is what makes him eternal, a faceless shadow that reminds us that some mysteries are never meant to be solved.